All right, everyone, good morning. And we have some great things lined up for you here today. If you recall in our June meeting, we asked you to give us some feedback on these meetings. And I want to share with you some of the feedback that we got, and also then immediately parlay it into the first item that we have up on our agenda today. Really pleased that we have our director of our licensure office, Brian Devine, with us to just review the requirements for the emergency license for the upcoming school year. I know we sent some information ahead of time so that you could take a look at our resource videos that we have available for you to be just using as sort of a turnkey tool within your schools and districts to remind your teachers, remind your administrators about the emergency licensure requirements. But we imagine you have questions, we imagine you have concerns, anything that you bring with you today. Brian is with us. We're going to get started with that so that Brian can get on to other things this morning. But really, we'll save some time for Q&A after Brian presents so that you can ask questions of him. I'm also pleased that we are able to introduce to you our new Ombudspersons from the Executive Office of Education, and that'll be the second major thing on our agenda. Then, some really overall updates, dyslexia update, as well as some general special education updates, and then time for Q&A as always at the end. So as we look at that survey, thank you so much for the feedback that you provided us. If you recall, we asked you to give us feedback on these meetings. Are they purposeful? Are they helpful? And so our first question was just about the usefulness. There was an additional category. It's not like we just asked you how is it useful or just somewhat useful. There was a category of not useful, and I'm really pleased to see that of the 88 responses that we got, overwhelmingly very or somewhat useful. Just 3 undecided, and we want to win you all over, so we're going to keep at it. But really good to see that feedback. We also asked you about how often we should be meeting, and you asked for monthly, pretty overwhelmingly. And so we are going to maintain monthly meetings. At the end of today's presentation, I'm going to show you the dates for the upcoming school year, all of them. We'll take December off, but we'll be together throughout the rest of this upcoming school year, starting in September. And we'll make sure that you have the dates all at once because you gave us some good feedback. One of the pieces of feedback was give us the dates all at once. It's a little hard to go meeting by meeting, and so we are certainly doing that. Another really key piece of feedback that you gave us was to continue to work to improve the question and answer period that we do at the end of these meetings. They are not recorded, but the special ed directors really told us that this is a really key feature of these meetings. We've already made some changes so that we get sort of the right experts, so that I'm more the one facilitating and going to each of the experts on our team here at DESE to get the information that you need. So we really are working hard to make sure that we make that Q&A session as meaningful for you as possible. And so, as just a quick reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A feature. The chat is turned off. We want to just really funnel those questions to Q&A. And if you even brought some questions, like I said, about the emergency licensure, please do so, and we'll make sure that we are responsive during this meeting. Some of the top topics that you raised for additional meetings, we said, hey, what do you want to talk about in these meetings? What do you want to review together? What do you want us to bring to you? The top 3 are listed there. There were many, but these are the top 3, addressing the mental health needs of our students, the IEP improvement project, and then staffing. So like I said, we really took your feedback to heart, and we said, what can we do immediately about staffing? Staffing is a big issue. If we don't have our staff, we can't run our schools. So we thought, let's invite Brian. And Brian, if you could just go ahead and come on camera, start your video. We are just really pleased to have you here with us today. We think that, just going back over the requirements for the emergency license will be really key so that we can get people what they need. But Brian, are you having any trouble coming on camera? Because I can...
Yeah, it says the host has blocked my camera, apparently.
Well, don't you know? So how about that?
There we go. All right. I even put on like a collared shirt and everything today, button down, So
Looks good.
Right. So hello, everyone. Brian Devine, as Russell mentioned, I am the Director of Educator Licensure. I've been with the department since 1997 and actually in this role as Director of Licensure since 2004. So today we're going to mainly talk about the emergency license, but up for grabs on sort of anything licensure related. I know we're mainly focusing on special education. So if we can jump to the next slide. Good news, the emergency license, it is back. So there was the original emergency license that was in operation basically from about June 8th of 2020 to December 12th, 2021. Because the state of emergency ended and there was language in there that said 180 days from the end of the state of emergency is what our authorization period was for the original emergency license. We had to stop issuing it, but through the supplemental budget, the emergency license is back. So over the next few slides, we'll talk about both the old and the new emergency license and get into some of the specifics on qualifying for special ed and ESL because it's a little different. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, let's see, well, the original emergency license was valid originally till June 30, 2021. The commissioner has extended that twice, first to June 30th, 2022, and now to June 30th, 2023. However, it's not automatically extended for all educators. So educators with a special ed or ESL license, they have to demonstrate that they have qualified and they have subject matter knowledge basically in order to get an extension. If you're a math teacher, a foreign language teacher, elementary teacher, that's not necessarily the case. And our legal office suggested that this be the road that happens for special ed and ESL teachers because of federal requirements. So we didn't just arbitrarily choose to make the bar higher for special ed and ESL teachers to get an emergency license. That came down from the legal office and because of federal requirements. So, and as you can see there, I mentioned earlier at the previous slide that we had until 180 days, which turned out to be December 12th, 2021, to be able to issue the first round of the emergency license. So let's go to the next slide, if you don't mind. So how does like an ESL and a special education teacher that has the old emergency license, how do they demonstrate that they have subject matter knowledge? Well, for ESL teachers, it's fairly straightforward, and that's passing the ESL test because we actually have a test in place that demonstrates subject matter knowledge for ESL teachers. With special education, we do not have a test, a content test on special ed laws, on knowledge of services provided by other agencies, on how to modify the curriculum for students with disabilities, so on and so forth, right? Augmentative devices and assistive technologies, all that good stuff that makes up the subject matter knowledge of special ed. And I was more focused there on moderate disabilities, not severe or deaf and hard of hearing. So the process for a special ed teacher is to go through the competency review process. We're going to get into more detail a little bit later about the competency review, but mainly you can demonstrate the competencies through mentored employment, seminars, courses, workshops, and this other avenue that was more recently created is structured guidance and supports. So as far as sort of timelines to get an extension, certainly if you were employed last year under an emergency license and your district is retaining you, you'd want to have the extension in place for the upcoming school year. If not, waivers are available. So please know that if someone isn't able to obtain an extension, you can employ them under the waiver, and you would have to go through the sort of typical waiver process that would be demonstrating to us that you posted the position, that there is you have a listing of anyone who was licensed and reasons why they're not qualified, reasons why this person is qualified. So that would be the typical sort of waiver process. But as far as getting the emergency extension, so theoretically, there's no deadline to apply for the extension. I guess technically, if we're going to hold true to June 30th, 2023 as the expiration date of the old emergency license, then certainly that would be the deadline to be able to get an extension. So no real deadlines there. There's no cost. It's free. I will throw something out though, that with the new emergency license that we'll be getting into shortly, they also have an ability to extend the emergency license. And with ELAR, there's only so much we can kind of build in there. We can't have sort of two separate trains running at the same time for basically the same license. with two different processes. So currently right now, IT is working on building solutions as much as possible to get an extension for the new emergency license. There will be a fee for that. It will be $25. So what I would suggest is if you have or you're employing someone that has the old emergency license and they haven't yet applied for the extension, they're probably better off doing that over the next few weeks, because probably around mid-September, maybe later September, ELAR will be ready for the new emergency extensions, and that will have a fee in it. We will be able to refund someone with the old emergency license, but there's going to be a process and it's going to be confusing. So I would say if you have the old emergency license, and especially if you are employed under it in your continuing employment, you should be actively engaged right now in the process of trying to get that extension. So word for advice. And I know Russell, he mentioned the videos were sent in advance, or the video on the emergency extension. We've had over 1,200 views of that video thus far. We actually sent it directly to people with an emergency license. So hopefully that walks people through what the requirements are to get the extension and is a helpful tool. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the new emergency license and some differences, right? So it's, given that it was in the supplemental budget, there's actually some subtle differences in the language that authorize us this round for this version of the emergency license compared to the older one, right? So for example, the old emergency license was kind of valid for school years, right? When it was first issued, I mentioned it was going to be valid until June 30th, 2021. Language indicated that it could be valid until then or other date as determined by the commissioner. And subsequently, the commissioner has extended that twice, and always valid until June 30th at the end of the school year, right? So now June 30th, 2023. Now, this new emergency license is valid for a calendar year, 12 months from the date of issuance, right? So there's one sort of significant difference there, and one thing that had to be solved within ELAR in solving the difference between the old and the new. In addition, this emergency license can be extended twice, although some people may not actually be able to get two extensions because the requirements to get two extensions may be less than the requirements to get licensed, to obtain a provisional license, for example. And with special ed and ESL, we really couldn't go back to the old requirements that were initially in place to get special ed and ESL and have people with the old emergency license trying to get an extension doing subject matter knowledge. But now all of a sudden we offer a brand new emergency license and we're not requiring subject matter knowledge to get that. So the bar is the same, whether you're trying to get a brand new emergency license today or since May 26th, or you are in possession of an old emergency license unit and you're trying to extend it, right? So everyone in possession of an old special ed emergency license or trying to get a new special ed emergency license, they all have to do and demonstrate the same thing. So the bar is the same. All right, so next slide, please. All righty. So as I mentioned, they can be extended twice. You will have to demonstrate and make progress in order to get an extension. We are in the process right now of developing and inputting into the system what those requirements will be. And as I mentioned, sometimes you won't really be able to get two extensions because in the meantime, you're able to get licensed. So for example, many secondary teachers like in English, history, science, phys ed, the requirements to get a provisional license is to pass ComLit, pass the content test, and have a bachelor's degree. Well, you have to have a bachelor's degree to get the emergency license. So if you got one extension by passing ComLit, to get the second extension, theoretically, you'd pass the subject matter test. Well, that would mean that you've now met the requirements for a provisional license. So we're not going to give you an extension on an emergency license when we can give you a provisional license. So it's actually this week that we likely will announce sort of what the process will be for the emergency license. Online, we have a tool called the License Requirements tool. You plug in what license you want, teacher, moderate disabilities, pre-K to 8, emergency, and it tells you what the requirements are. We are in process of using that tool now to insert what the requirements will be for an emergency extension. And we're going to do it in phases with the help of IT. First do academic teachers, then likely vocational teachers, and then likely administrators and professional support staff. And then more work will continue within the system in ELAR to get the system equipped and ready to go. That will likely be mid to late September. I think we're actually going to put September 29th in the announcement that is the latest we expect ELAR to be ready to process extensions. The good news is that these are extensions related to the new emergency license. The first possible date that someone could have gotten and received a new emergency license was May 26th, right? Every Thursday night, system goes down 5:30 to 6:30 roughly. So at some point on that Thursday night, May 26th at 9 o'clock or something, someone could have applied for an emergency license. We put in the announcement May 27th was going to be really the first day that you could apply for and get an emergency license. So anyone who got licensed on say like May 26th, May 27th, May 28th, that emergency license is valid until that date of 2023. So at this point, they have what, 10 months still to be able to work under that emergency license in time to figure out what's needed to get the emergency extension. But we know time's clicking, school year's about to start, people are going to be working under the license, they're going to have their hands full, perhaps in a brand new role, working in a new district, working in a new role. So we want to get it out there so people know what progress would be towards getting an extension. All right, next slide, please. So here is an example of what progress might look like for someone with an emergency license trying to get that extended into a first year. So since they got an emergency license, we're going to basically be looking for two things: that they have been participating in an induction program, which all school districts are required to provide an induction program to an employee in their first year of employment. They don't have to complete the induction, but they have to participate in the induction. If someone is going to get a second extension, at that point, we would be looking for completion of induction. But based on timing, you know, example again, back to someone who may have gotten an extension on May 27th, they may not have, you know, the induction program that they're in may last a full school year. So May 27th, the school year, you know, if we look to 2023, the school year is still going, induction's not completed, the district's not going to give them a letter that said that they completed induction. So participating in induction is going to be fine. Then you can pass the lit skills test. You can pass a content test. We know for most special ed teachers, content will be the general curriculum test and foundations of reading. You can enroll in a state-approved educator preparation program. We know that that's not required to get a provisional license. It is required to get an initial license, but we figured that would be a step forward in evidence of that educator trying to get licensed. They can also complete coursework within a program that they're enrolled in. So they can't just sign up and take a random course that happens to be part of the program. They have to be enrolled in that program and take a course. And this is going to be since they got the emergency license. So progress that they had made towards licensure before they got the emergency license is not progress since they got the emergency license. So someone that may have already passed the foundations of reading test when they got the emergency license, we're not going to count that as progress because they had passed it 6 months before they got the emergency license. But if they passed also the communication literacy skills test since they had a passing score in the foundations of reading test and since they got the emergency license, that would be considered as progress. So in the case that someone may have already been enrolled in an approved program when they got their emergency license, since getting the emergency license, if they took a course within that approved program, that would be progress. And the same type of logic will apply for people getting their second extension. So it would be, since you got the first extension, what progress have you made towards getting licensed? Alrighty, so next slide, please. We're going to go on to the competency review a little bit. So as I mentioned, we don't have a subject matter test for special ed, right? So how we demonstrate subject matter knowledge, that typically would be done through an approved preparation program, but many people trying to get a license, either provisional or add a license, they haven't gone or will not go through an approved program for the new field or for getting their first license. They might enter first at provisional versus doing the approved program. So this is how we measure that someone has content knowledge, right? You want to be a history teacher, like I have an old and valid history license, you got to pass the history test. That's how we measure subject matter knowledge for most of the licenses. But when we don't have a test in place for a license, there's many foreign language licenses that exist like this. Some of the special ed areas don't have a content test specific to the special ed SMKs, so we do a competency review. You can, again, demonstrate competency through coursework, professional development like seminars or workshops, or mentored employment. So that can be done on the job with support through the school district. We're looking for this magic number of 10. That number of 10 comes from the old sort of highly qualified days, but this competence review process was emerging around the same time as highly qualified. So 10 is really where that number is, if you're ever curious as to why the threshold is at 10. You know, the competence review process can be a little bit like going to the dentist, because there can be a lot of back and forth and some pain with demonstrating coverage of, right? Someone sends in a transcript. We see that there's a course on there. We see it's related to special ed, but we don't know how much time in that course was dedicated to this particular competency. So oftentimes we need to get a letter from either the instructor of the course or from the college university that specifically states, here's how much time was dedicated in this course to this competency. Most courses are 45 hours in length as far as, you know, total hours. Educators going to, or the person taking the course is going to spend more time than that based on homework and reading and all that sort of stuff. But usually it's 45 instructional hours. So certainly maximum in a typical 3-credit course that someone could satisfy is 4 competencies. You can also, within a course, we could get a letter that says within this course, 5 hours of instruction was covered. And then someone could have workshops that they took to bridge that gap and have 5 hours of workshops plus the 5 hours of coursework to get to that 10. So we can do things like that. And then that SG&S will cover on the next slide. So if we can go to that slide, yes. So structured guidance supports was created a number of years ago. Actually, I think someone who may be on this call, Matt Holloway, actually was a lead on developing SG&S. And this was really created as a way to really streamline the competency review process, right? So it can be done on the job. It's within 150 hours of a field-based experience. It's not exactly the mentored employment, because mentored employment through the competence review, that can be used to cover a competency or all the competencies. Through the competence review, you can mishmash coursework, seminars, workshops, and mentored employment together to demonstrate all of the competencies. So you could take a course and knock off 2 competencies. You could have mentored employment and knock off 3 competencies into seminars and workshops and knock off 2 others, right? Within SG&S, it's all or nothing, right? So this may not be the best process for everyone, but you know, given the fact that you're probably employing a lot of individuals under the emergency license right now, it could be the best route for a lot of individuals as well. So someone that has been maybe part of a program and is working their way through the program, trying to knock off the MTELs, is working under the emergency license now. Through the courses that they've done within that approved program, they may be able to demonstrate all or most of the competencies. If someone has applied to us and they're 1 or 2 competencies away from being able to demonstrate all of the subject matter knowledge requirements, then SGNS probably isn't the best route for them, because in the form of this 150-hour field-based experience, they're going to have to be assessed on all of the competencies. You can't just knock off 1 or 2 competencies within SGNS. It's all the competencies or nothing. And similar to the mentored employment, the supervising educator, they have to have an initial or professional license for at least 3 years in the role of the license that the individual is seeking. You have sort of a pre-meeting that talks about what the expectations and requirements are of this SGNS experience. We have guidelines. I think they'll be put in the chat if they haven't already, available on SGNS. We have rubrics that break out every single SMK with what sort of the demonstration looks like at either unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary. For each of the competencies, someone has to demonstrate at least a proficient level to get an overall meets rating. But basically, through the local district, you can support your employee through this process towards getting licensed or getting the emergency license. And please note that whatever effort they're making towards getting an emergency extension, that's going to apply to them getting a provisional or an initial license, right? So this demonstration of subject matter knowledge requirements, it's not in effect solely for the emergency extension, right? These are the same exact requirements that's required to get a provisional license. So they're not going to have to do extra stuff when they turn around and apply for a provisional license. All of the subject matter knowledge that they satisfy to get the emergency extension will be applied towards getting their provisional license, or if they were trying to add an initial license or a professional license. So Russell, I think at this point, good to wrap up and see if we have any questions from those in attendance.
Yeah, Brian, thank you so much. We do have some really good questions in the Q&A section of our panel here and of our webinar. And let's just talk about administrator, the administrative special education license. Brian, is a similar competency review process available for that license?
No, one is not actually required, and an extension is not required either, as far as like demonstrating SMKs. So the process is, really completely different than what we just covered for teachers of special ed or ESL compared to administrators. So with the special ed administrator license, basically the requirements are possession of a bachelor's degree, that you can't qualify for the initial license in special ed administrator, and that you have a prerequisite license, that being an initial teaching license. In fact, and this could be an error on our part, but there's the prerequisite is any initial license, as opposed to when you actually go for the initial special ed administrator license, it has to be a license in special ed or school psychologist or school counselor, school social work, adjustment counselor, or another administrative area like a principal.
Great. Brian, just people need to just go back over the big picture here, because there are a lot of great details, and really encourage people to take a look at the slides and all the details in them. But I see some questions in the chat about just again, treetops level. There's the old emergency license and a new emergency license, and both have extension ability. Can you just go over kind of at a high level, old and new?
Yeah, sure. So high level old, right, particularly in the area of special ed and ESL, right? Those were all valid up until June 30th of 2022, right? Then the commissioner extended everybody's emergency license except for those categories because of federal requirements to June 30th, 2023. So they are eligible to get it extended, but you can look them up in ELAR. We also have an ability through Dropbox Central where you could submit a list of all your staff, in special ed or ESL, and submit them in an Excel file, submit them through the licensure status Dropbox, And the next day you have a file available that tells you what licenses they have, what their expiration date is, and so forth. So that status drop box is pretty helpful as a monitoring tool to see where people are with licensure. But you may have a lot of people with the old emergency license that now have an expired emergency license since it's past June 30th, 2022. You can see, have they applied for the extension yet? What's their status? Do I need to apply for a waiver? What I would recommend is that for anyone with the old emergency license, before applying for the waiver, I would check in and have a conversation with them to see what their progress is towards getting the extension. If they're making good progress and that extension can be granted fairly soon and ideally before the start of the school year, you might want to hold off applying for the waiver. Getting the waiver now may impact what they need to do to get a subsequent waiver. So if they do get it extended, it's valid till June 30, 2023, and it's no longer extended beyond that date, and in the meantime, they were on a waiver, that could impact what they have to do for a waiver. With the new emergency license, right, everyone's going to have unique expiration dates because they're all getting them on different dates and so forth. We've issued like 2,600 or something like that since May 26th. So those that got licensed yesterday are going to have an expiration date, August 1st, 2023, compared to those that got it on May 28th. They will have May 28th, 2023, right? So their expiration dates will be all over the place. Might make it a little bit tricky, but you already deal with that when you have people with a professional license. Their expiration dates are all different and unique as well. The bar to get the new emergency license is the same as the bar to get the extension, but that just might mean that we're issuing fewer licenses in special ed at the emergency level, because we are looking for all of those subject matter knowledge requirements to be covered before we're going to issue an emergency license. Where initially, basically June 8th, 2020 up to December 12th, 2021, all you needed was a bachelor's degree to get the special ed emergency license, and to have that you're not qualified to get a regular license. So there's probably there could be a lot of people walking around with an emergency special ed license, probably now expired, since it would have expired to me on June 30, 22, that didn't know anything really about special ed, but because it was only a bachelor's degree required and no demonstration of SMKs, a lot of people were eligible for that. Now the requirements are much stricter.
Great. So if you had an old emergency license, you can't apply for the new emergency license. You would just extend your old emergency license, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So you can't get two emergency licenses for the same license type and grade level. It's possible that someone who had maybe they only had the moderate disabilities 5 to 12, or maybe they had severe disabilities, that's all levels. They could come in and get moderate disabilities pre-K to 8, because that's a different grade level, different license. So, but if you had severe disabilities, old emergency, it expired on June 30th, you can't get a new emergency license. If you could qualify for it, that means you could get the extension, because again, the requirements to get a new one and the requirements to extend the old are the exact same. If your old emergency license expires, you can still apply for an extension. You can still qualify for an extension. So the expired status isn't going to prevent you from being able to apply for the old extension. Again, the only caveat is that once the new extension process is built into ELAR, likely mid to end of September, there's going to be a fee associated with the new emergency license. We'll just have to work through that for anybody who's trying to really apply for an old extension, issue them that $25 refund, process their extension request.
Great. Brian, I know your time is tight, so maybe just a couple more questions. How long can a long-term substitute serve in a position without being licensed for that position?
So in the area of special education, it's 90 consecutive days, right? So the last 3 school years, the board has approved regulations that permit a long-term sub to not need a license or a waiver, but it doesn't include special ed or ESL areas, again, because of federal requirements. So that means that the old definition sort of applies to special ed and ESL roles. And the old definition, it's actually still in the regulations, and it indicates that if you're in a long-term sub role, or if you're in a substitute role, basically up to 90 consecutive days, you don't need a license or a waiver. But over 90 consecutive days, you would need a license or a waiver. So, and also in the area of special ed, given the IEPs and everything else, I would suggest, putting someone under a waiver if you know that they're going to be in the role for that amount of time. It might make your life a little bit easier as far as dealing with any sort of complaints or issues, that pop up from advocates or parents regarding the qualifications of the individual.
Brian, 2 more quick ones. Can you apply for emergency license if you previously had a waiver?
Yes. Yeah. So the only restrictions are if you are licensed as a teacher, you will not be able to apply for a teacher license, emergency license. Having a waiver as a teacher does not impact your ability to get an emergency license. So if you're licensed as a teacher, you could apply for an emergency special ed administrative license, as long as that was your first administrative license. So if the emergency license is going to be the first license in that category, and the categories are teacher, teacher specialist, professional support, and admin, those are the 4 categories. As long as the emergency license would be your first license in that category, yes, you can apply for it and get it.
Brian, last question. Nurses, any consideration for emergency licensure for nurses?
So we can award emergency licenses for nurses. The requirements for an emergency school nurse license are somewhat high, I would say, but we also didn't want to, during a pandemic, health-related pandemic, have very loosey-goosey requirements to come in as a school nurse, right? So to get an emergency school nurse license, you have to have the RN, you have to have the degree, you have to have a year of experience under the school nurse license, and you have to have completed 2 of the 4 orientation components, that's required to become a school nurse. So basically, you don't have to have all of the orientation completed, you don't have to have all of the experience, and you don't have to have passed the communication literacy skills test. So there's a little relief there, but not a ton. But at the same time, we didn't want to sort of create a back-end loophole to allow a whole bunch of unqualified people into the role of school nurse while they're assisting school communities with the health pandemics.
Great, Brian, I really appreciate all this information, and would just encourage people to relook at the slides. I know that there was a lot to take in, and we could always follow up as necessary as well. So thank you again, Brian. Really appreciate your being here on short notice.
No problem. Appreciate it, Russell. Take care.
Have a great rest of the day.
You as well.
So I'm just going to move along in our presentation as well, and just really excited to have with us today the 2 new people serving in the role of being the Ombudspersons from the Executive Office of Education, both Heidi Gold and Emily Sherwood. Heidi, I'm really pleased to turn it over to you to introduce this new role and to just explain a little bit more about what you and Emily are doing. Thanks so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Russell. It's great to be here. So the Massachusetts Executive Office of Education established the Office of the Ombudsperson to address some of the really complex and time-sensitive situations where kids are facing an emergency and may need urgent decisions about their education. A lot of time, these are what we hear as kids who are boarding or kids who are stuck, but it can be a little bit broader than that. So our goal is to establish strong practices and effective communication systems across state agencies to enhance our collaboration and create repeatable processes so we can respond to these kids and reduce the length of time that they are boarding. So who are we? Good morning. I'm Heidi Gold, and I'm a Senior Policy Manager at the Executive Office of Education. My background is in social work, and I work with Undersecretary Reale on several interagency and intersecretariat initiatives involving students of all ages, including infant and toddler development and higher ed mental health, as well as several projects with DESE and with Russell. I'm doing a little bit of work on early college and the Pathways programs, and I serve as Secretary Piser's appointee to the Safe and Supportive Schools Commission. So that is part of what I am bringing to the table, and I'm thrilled to work with Emily, who will introduce herself.
Thanks, Heidi. Hi, everybody. One of my identities is I'm a retired state employee. I retired a year and a half ago. My last job was as Deputy Commissioner for Child, Youth, and Family Services at the Department of Mental Health. And I may have met some of you in the past. I oversaw the implementation of the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative. So I came on board just to help sort of be a bridge between EOHHS and EOE and help Heidi learn all the alphabets of the EOHHS world.
Thanks, Emily. Russell, I can go to the next one, please.
Sure.
Thanks. So we are new and we're still working some things out, but what we are certainly serving as the main point of contact for other state agencies who are working to resolve complex cases. It's come up a few times, but this is where our colleagues at the Executive Office of Health and Human Services or Department of Mental Health may be working with hospital staff or attorneys or other social workers or families directly or others, and they contact us when there is a child with an education issue. These mostly involve children with ASD and ID who apparently are already pretty well known to many of you and to the districts. We are really serving as a liaison right now between EOE and DESE and all of you, and the EOHHS and all of their agencies. So Emily and I sit on regular calls and meetings with representatives from these agencies at the state level. Next slide, please, Russell. So upon obtaining a release, as cases come to us, we may contact you or your colleagues and ask you about a particular child. We may ask about educational services while a child is boarding, while they're in an emergency department or medical unit awaiting admission to either a psychiatric unit, or they're waiting for something, but they're stuck, and we've been asked to see if education services can be brought into the hospital. We may ask to provide an update on a placement that's already been approved to understand the status of those applications to various residential schools. And actually, in that case, we've been informed by our counsel that we may not need a release to just ask about a situation like that, where we know somebody is already in the works and we're just asking for a status update. And we also may ask for information related to a recent IEP and related evaluations. But we will continue to refer to the BSEA and PRS for any dispute resolution. And really, we want to hear from you. We're new in this process. We are putting ourselves kind of in the middle of the regions and our partners. And we're looking to understand how we can design and implement better processes at the state level to help facilitate this work, understanding that some is going to be at the state level and some is at the local level, and that those work together. Our contact information is posted. You can see I have a phone number there. I will be honest with you, I don't use it very much. it is best to reach me by email. I have that phone so I can call you back. But Emily, did I leave anything out? Anything else you want to add? Russell, anything you want to add, or do you want to open it up for any questions?
No, I'm just, I'm grateful for this role that you all are taking on right now, and just really a way, some of you, we've had conversations in the past, even with me directly, about students who are, in emergency rooms for extended period of time, for months. And this is a really tricky situation. And so having people like Emily and Heidi who can really take the time and work across state agencies, work with you, I think will be really important to channeling this more effectively into the future. So I think this is just a starting point. I also appreciate that Heidi and Emily have reached out to the Association of Special Education Directors, to ACE, to have a small group meeting, and really appreciate Carla Jentz being willing to find a way to make that happen. So, there are ways that we are really working to engage special education leaders around this, in addition to, like Heidi said, the other state agencies that Heidi and Emily are already very much engaged with. So this is just an introductory, and if people have questions, Heidi and Emily will still be around at the end of today's meeting to see if anything comes up in the Q&A. So Heidi, Emily, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so I'm going to move along quickly. So as to save a few minutes at the end for special ed questions, special ed related questions. So just a quick update on dyslexia. You may be aware that we are seeking public comment right now on proposed dyslexia regulations. I'm not going to go into it at length. You can certainly come back and take a look at this slide, but just know that we are using this email address that you see in that bottom bullet there through Friday the 19th of this month to get public feedback. So if you're interested, please take a minute to do so. We really want well-rounded and thoughtful feedback from as many stakeholders as possible. Also, our Center for Instructional Support just released universal screening assessments that match the requirements or the guidelines regarding dyslexia. And so just, a reminder that this exists. These screeners are kind of vetted. And we hope that, as with everything we talk about with dyslexia, it's a series of steps towards fully implementing the guidelines. And so, as you kind of take a look at the assessments you're using, now and in the future, just working to continue to adapt them, evolve them towards the screeners that we know are most effective over time. So appreciate your interest in that topic and your willingness to continue to evolve practices. A few quick special education updates. Nina, just quickly on reducing and eliminating timeout.
Sure. So just a reminder that they're reducing and eliminating the use of timeout, that there was guidance issued September of last year, 2021. And the guidance really has different sections, but the goal is really to provide students with the most opportunities to maximize their learning alongside their peers. So there are recommendations in there, including collecting data and starting to analyze how often students are using timeout rooms. And again, these are timeout rooms separate from a classroom that are separate from with a separate room down the hall that are not typically used for all students. So just encouraging people to study up and just refresh their memories on some of the recommendations, notification to parents, basic requirements that are included in the regulations of the 4600s, and then also 1800s for the approved special education schools. And then along with that, we just this week or last week issued a master agreement. So that can be found on Combis on that website there, that link that Brian will share in the chat. And we're looking to identify and pre-approve vendors who schools and districts can go into contracts with, and they will do a whole series of work on looking at effective behavioral processes and programs that your school and districts can implement to decrease the use of the timeout rooms. So there are about 8 different categories, including data analysis, revising policies, training, consulting. We have specific work on equity and racial equity, mitigating any strategies so that they're not being overused with certain populations of students, and then ongoing evaluation. So that that master agreement is open and vendors can apply. So share it with anybody that you feel comfortable sharing it with, and we hope to have some great vendors on board for anybody to hire. You can use local and federal funds, ESIS funds. So there will be opportunities for you to purchase these services from a vendor that the department has pre-qualified.
Excellent. Thanks, Dina. So more to come as we have those vendors applying. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We also, as we start the new school year, just wanted to remind you that the allowance for home hospital services continues to be in place. It's in regulation. So the types of things that you did last year to look at those students who are not able to come to school for a medical reason, a documented medical reason, that continues to be in place. It's in regulation. So it wasn't developed just for COVID. And I think that's good news because it just helps this persist into the future. And just a reminder that in our Q&A guidance, when we talk about students who are receiving services who are homebound or hospital bound, that they can receive those services through live streaming or remote instruction. So the creative thinking that you did last year for your students who cannot come to school for medical reasons, just ask you to continue to make those considerations for this upcoming school year, hopefully using the forms as necessary to get that information from physicians and, have those meetings for students who can't come into school for more than 60 days to determine how they can receive those services that they need. If you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, just want to quickly remind you that OSEP recently released guidance about addressing the needs of children with disabilities related to discipline. And particularly want to call out this Q&A guidance. As a former special education director, as a former superintendent, I would absolutely be sitting down with my teams and looking at that Q&A. It has really helpful information about when are FBAs required, when are BIPs required. It goes over interim alternative educational settings. It talks about manifestation determination. And there's some just really thoughtful scenarios that the U.S. Department of Education has considered there that they come up in real life. They are likely to come up during this upcoming school year. So familiarizing yourself with that resource, I just can't strongly recommend enough. And if you have questions about it, please feel free to reach out. But I think as we go ahead, we will continue to use this as a resource, and we would hope that you will too. Jamie, I want to turn it over to you to talk about resolution funds.
Sure. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, but this is kind of a year at a glance. But you'll have this list in the slide, so hopefully that will help you prepare for the next year. So as you know, June 1st, we needed to receive written affirmations for FY23, which is also year 2 of the resolution funds. So we're still waiting for about 40 districts. So if you have not sent us your written information, if you could send that to us as soon as possible, that would be great. There's a link to the new version of it's a sample affirmation that has some language about the resolution funds that should make it a little bit easier for you. I know that people have been asking questions about the 240 and 262, the consolidated application. As you know, that's where you're going to be putting in your budget and narrative description for how you'll be using the resolution funds for this next year. We expect that to be posted soon as far as the consolidated application. Just a reminder that making sure that when you are completing the tabs in the application, that you're making sure that you're in the Equitable Services section, you're putting how you're going to be expending the funds for the resolution funds if you receive them. Because that's information that we'll need when we ask you for your self-report mid-year, which I'm going to get to in a minute. Just a reminder that the services should start up in the fall as soon as possible. This is just a little bit of a list that hopefully will help you. And child count, as you know, occurs between October 1st and December 1st. Just a little reminder that child count, it's important to keep those records and documentation because you're not going to report that count until the following year. So next summer or next fall when you submit your consolidated application to us. And I can go to the next one, Russell. So that brings us to December. So this is the self-assessment that you all received last year. This last bullet is just one piece that will be new this year. And I just want you to have a little bit of a heads up. We're going to be asking you for the date of your spring consultation meeting. We're trying to make sure that we're helping you with scheduling things out so that we can all make sure that we are on time with the written affirmations for the June 1st date. I realized that letters went out late last year, so we'll be making sure that those letters go out in April, so you'll have your allocations in April. We're hoping that you'll be able to schedule your meetings for May And then we'll be submitting the affirmations for FY24, which will be the last year of the resolution funds. And again, one last reminder, for those of you that are receiving them, it'll only be for the 240 because the 262 funds for the resolution funds were just the first 2 years. So this will be the last year for 262, one more year for 240. And I did kind of a really speed thing, Russell. So they'll have this list and we'll keep reminding everybody.
Absolutely. We can come back to this topic as well as Equitable Services overall. But Jamie, I really appreciate that. And again, you can send us questions as they come up as well. So like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we are announcing all the meetings for this upcoming school year. So please take a note. You can put these in your calendar now so that we have them all ready to go. And just a reminder, no meeting in December. Also a reminder that the way that we reach you with the Zoom link is using what we have available in profiles. So you need to make sure that the district administrator for your organization keeps the your email up to date, because that's what we kind of blast this link out to get to special education leaders from across the state. So please make sure that the profile for your district is up to date with your name and information so that we can get this information to you. And we look forward to seeing you at our very next meeting, which will be Friday, September 16th. It'll be here before you know it. Let's just go to some quick Q&A in our final minutes here.